Hello, guys. My name is Dr. Christopher Coulter. I will be your professor for Western Literature this semester. This is spring 2019. And this is a little film that you'll see along with reading a couple of introductory items for your first day of class, which is Wednesday, the 9th, next week as I'm recording this. So today I'm just going to give you an introduction to what the course is about, how we're going to proceed, in other words, how you're going to be reading, and how I'm going to grade, and then how you're going to get feedback on the grading, and so on. My information will be on the syllabus that you will download. A syllabus is just a course schedule with my personal information on it as well. And the best way to contact me is by the email address, which is the full Lee email address, and that's ccoulter@Lee University, spelled out, edu. And you can reach me. I may not get back to you at, say, 3 in the morning, but I will get back to you on the next business day. I've learned from doing these online classes that a lot of people like to operationalize, or you like to get with it after, say, 10 o'clock or so at night, and that's fine with me. If you have an email question, you can go ahead and email me. I might be up till 11 or 12 or so, so you can email me, but normally I'll get back to you the next day. So this class is live. This does not go through something called the DAL. The DAL is handled for another audience. You are a regular undergraduate at Lee University, and you're taking this course under the same guidelines that you would be taking any other course that you would be sitting in for. So first of all, let me dispel one rumor. There appears to be a rumor that people taking this online course will also have to come to campus and do things live, and that is not accurate. Okay, so everything that you need to do for this course will be online, including the tests and submitting the paper and taking quizzes. So you will not have to come to the library, to the course. There will not be a live part of the course. So you can go ahead and do what you were planning to do at the regular daytime time block, and then get to this course in the evening or whenever it is you like to work on it. Okay? Now, it is the same content as the live course I'm teaching. So I teach a live version of this 10 o'clock class. And so you will see on your syllabus, it will say 10 o'clock, and it will say OL for online. It just means that I'm using the same syllabus because they're really the same classes, just 2 different sections. Okay, first the title. This book, or this course rather, I should say, is called Western Literature, Ancient to Renaissance. So what that means is this is one of 2 sections of 221, and another follow-up course called 222 that make up or comprise what we call the Western Literature block in the general course offerings. The 221, Ancient to Renaissance, refers to a time period, ancient literature starting with the Greeks, and then going up through the Renaissance would be in the late 1500s to early 1600s. And we're going to end with a novel, a very famous novel, in translation, called Don Quixote by Miguel Cervantes. So the book, however, that you will be buying, you can get it in the bookstore, as well as Amazon, if that's where you're going. But it is called the Norton Anthology for World Literature, and it's the 4th edition. And it has 3 volumes. The volume I'm holding is volume A, but there's also a volume B and a volume C, and those come in a packet. Whether you get it online or whether you buy it in the bookstore, it will come that way. I know what you're thinking. It seems confusing. The course is called Western Literature, but the book says World Literature. Is there a discrepancy? Well, the short answer is the discrepancy is not anything you have to worry about. You will be getting credit for Western Literature, and the book just happens to say World Literature, but what we will be covering will be mainly Western Literature with a couple of world bits thrown in. So don't worry too much about that, okay? Okay, getting to the nitty-gritty, how will you be evaluated in here? In other words, what is your grade going to be made up of? There are 2 exams in here. One is at a midterm, and that will be bold-faced on the syllabus, so you'll know exactly when that's coming. And then the other is in the final exam period. Our course, like all the other courses, is assigned to a certain period. You have a little bit more leeway here in the online course, and then I've given you until basically the last day of final exams on a Tuesday. I forget what day that is. I think it's April 29th or something like that, for you to finish the exam and turn it in. But you should be doing the exam in a 2-hour period and not using your book, except for the poems that I will allow you to use. On that, we're going to be on the honor system. I don't really have any other way to check whether you're using your book or not, so you'll have to be on your Christian honor. And that's good enough for me. We are also going to have something called discussion sheets. These will be daily sheets to show me to what extent you have finished your reading. And typically there are 10 questions keyed to that day's reading, including sometimes we will see a video, a short video. It might last 20 minutes, might last 40 minutes. And I'll have questions for that as well. And then you will submit that each day. At the end of every major selection we're going to read, you will also have a quiz, and you will be given roughly 45 minutes to take that quiz. So, for example, we're going to start with a Greek work called the Odyssey, which is a work by a Greek writer named Homer. And we're reading it, of course, in translation and English. And we're reading the entire thing. You may have read in high school bits and pieces of it, but we're reading all of it because it's worth it. And we're not having a quiz, though, in the first week. We're going to wait until the second week when we finish it. That's when we'll have our first quiz. There will be about 10 quizzes in all, covering the period, and I drop the lowest quiz automatically. Or if you're absent for a quiz and you couldn't make it, we'll drop that one. Okay, so that will be automatic. The other evaluation activity, which comes under evaluation on your syllabus, is called a response paper. And it's called response paper because it is not a research paper where you will need sources. Okay, now, if you are not an English major, you'll be writing a 2-page paper. And I will give the questions out a couple weeks ahead of time, and they will be very broad questions about what genre of literature you like play or poetry or the drama or something else. And you can respond in 2 pages. Okay, so that's 2 double-spaced type pages. By the way, everything you turn in here should be in Microsoft Word or PDF file. Okay, do not use Google Docs. If you have Google Docs, you need to transcribe or you need to save in Microsoft Word. We have Microsoft Word available free as a download on Portico, so make sure all documents turned into this class are Microsoft Word. Getting back to the writing assignment, the response paper, if you are an English major, whether it's education or writing or literature, you will have to write a 5-page double-spaced paper with 2 outside sources. Okay, so that one's a little more in-depth, but the vast majority of you who are not English majors will simply be writing a 2-page double-spaced paper, and you won't have to use any sources at all. It's just your opinion. You will refer to the work you've read and the book, but no outside resources other than the text you've already read. So the 2 exams are 30% each. That's 60%. And the response paper is 10%. The quizzes are a little bit more than the response paper, actually, because I consider your daily, your quiz participation to be more indicative of how you're getting through the course generally. So that will be 20% cumulative. Again, keeping in mind that we dropped the lowest quiz or the quiz you might have been absent for. And then the discussion sheets are essentially participation sheets, and you just get through the lecture or the reading and you fill out the discussion sheet and then you submit it online. That's 10% cumulative for your grade. Now, my attendance policy is not really relevant to this class because you're responsible for the work turned in, okay? So if you're absent for a day or you have to go somewhere, it's online, so you can still get to it. If you're sick and you're going to miss more than a day, then by all means contact me, email me. Tell me, for example, you can't take the quiz because you feel sick and you want to put it off. That's fine, and I'll build it in so that you can take the quiz at a later date, and I'll just email it to you. But you need to email me ahead of time so we can work that out, and I know that you're not just missing the quiz, for example. All right? Okay, those are the basics. You can click on the first day of class. You can read the syllabus through and read the next thing I'm going to have for you and see if you can make sense of it. And then on Friday, you're going to see a film in which you'll fill out a answer sheet or discussion sheet for the film. That will be online as well. And so for Wednesday, you just need to read through this. Now, what we're going to talk about now is something called epic characteristics in ancient literature. You will need this sheet for your first exam. And really, you should keep this sheet with you as you read through our first epic, which is a poem. It's a narrative poem by a guy named Homer. He only had one name as far as we know. And he's writing about 800 BC, before the time of Christ. And he was writing in what is called, he was in the Mycenaean period. Somehow the Mycenaeans disappeared, as you will find out in the reading of your book, and Greece went through a dark ages, and then they came back about 500 BC when they started to write things down again, and Homer's 2 major poems, the Iliad, which is a song about Ilium, or Troy, where there was a major battle fought between the Greeks and the Trojans. The outcome of which was decided by a Greek named Odysseus in Greek. Odysseus built a wooden horse. He put some kind of special forces soldiers in it, and the Trojans were understood to believe it was a gift. They hauled it up to their gates, which the Greeks had not been able to breach or invade the city of Troy because of the strong gates. And that night, when the Trojans were celebrating and drinking wine for the conclusion of their battle and their 10-year war with the Greeks slip out and do them destruction. That's where we get the phrase, beware of Greeks bearing gifts, which is not a phrase you may have used recently, but it is one that has come down to us in English. The Greeks have done a lot of good things too, of course, including giving us this great poem. But what is an epic? As it tells you here, an epic is a literary form. In modern times, we may hear it used as kind of a subject complement, like that party was epic or something like that, meaning big and exciting and all-encompassing. Well, that's kind of what epic means, the all-encompassing part. But epic is specifically referring to a type of literature which is also called heroic literature, in which you have a hero who is fighting on behalf of his nation and has the values of his nation. And most importantly, all of his readers have the same values as the hero. They want the hero to win because he represents them and their values. So let's think a little bit about an epic you may have heard of to get this down. For any of you who might have seen Lord of the Rings or read Lord of the Rings, let's use that quickly as an example. The Lord of the Rings was written by an English fellow, actually he was born in Germany. His name was J.R.R. Tolkien. He was a professor at Oxford University in England during the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. He was a friend of C.S. Lewis, famous Christian writer. Tolkien was a Roman Catholic, and he was born in Germany, and his family left Germany when the Nazis were coming up, and he used mythological material from ancient Nordic literature and early Germanic literature because he was an expert in both of those areas. He was one of the few people, for example, who could read the few remaining manuscripts in, say, Old Icelandic or Old Nordic. So he was an expert in Nordic myth. So he set his creation in a prehistoric era, back when those ancient Germanic peoples were, and Nordic peoples were, roaming the earth. So here are 10 characteristics that we might relate to the Lord of the Rings. If you've seen that, it's about the hobbits. Bilbo Baggins goes out to see the world. He picks up a ring which represents power, which is something he doesn't want because power corrupts. And he tries to get it back to this evil lord who runs the eastern side of the world. His name's Sauron, and Sauron kind of represents the Nazis, totalitarians that Tolkien recognized in his lifetime. So first of all, the first one is the action relates to the nation, a city, as well as a whole culture. Okay, so the action is what people do and how they do it, right? And the reason the action is important is because the people reading this want it to be recognizable to them. So, for example, the hobbits have a little village, and they live in these kind of hollowed out trees and so forth, but they aren't warriors. It's not a warrior culture. They like to, they're farmers essentially, and they like to bake cookies and drink mead, which is kind of early beer that early peoples drank. They made it out of honey and so forth, and wheat. It was kind of an early fermented honey. And so they would drink and talk. That's what their culture is about. And it isn't until they have to go on a journey that they go on a journey reluctantly. 3 hobbits go, and under the guidance of a wizard by the name of Gandalf, they take off on a journey and try to deliver this ring and get rid of its power so that the evil lord's focus won't be drawn to their western land. 2, it involves episodic adventures of a single hero facing adversity, usually war. Okay, so here we have a single hero. Bilbo Baggins is the real hero here. He has friends. They go with him. Sam Baggins and a couple others. And they are facing adversity, and they're not warriors themselves, but what they find out is that the civilizations that they come into are building up to a war. So there's a land of humans and elves and dwarves, And the humans are recruiting for a war against Sauron, the evil, and the humans are the good guys, and they're going to use the allies of the dwarves and the elves and the hobbits to help them plan so that they can fight this war against evil. So there are actually several heroes in Lord of the Rings, but for our purposes, we'll say that Bilbo's the hero here. 3, it's told in a wide scope with many adventures. The idea is to represent the known world of the time. Okay, so the world was limited back then. They didn't know anything about space. What they call Middle Earth came from the early Germanic, and by that they simply thought that, for example, when they saw a tree, that the tops of trees, which they couldn't see, were in heaven. The bottom of the trees they couldn't see were in lower earth. So the part of earth that they walked on and could see and grow plants on and animals was called Middle Earth, because it was the place where a living being could see things. And the many adventures they have in this tale have to do with the fact that they're compelled to go out away from Hobbitland and get out into the wide world. They actually travel over to the east, where Sauron's on top of this mountain that spits smoke, kind of like a volcano, representing his evil desires and so forth. And it's a pretty treacherous adventure. 4, there's major adversity in an enemy. Usually there's a central enemy of the hero's stature. Now, in other words, for the hero to be a hero, he has to do something worthwhile. And Bilbo is not a warrior again, but he manages to find the courage through, even though he's not represented as, they're not representative as having a Christian God or multiple gods. They believe in kind of apparently a kind of general redemptive creator God. And Gandalf is kind of the mediator, the wizard between the creator God and the hobbits. And the major enemy is actually much more stronger than they are individually, Sauron. But he has to fight them as a nation, so it's much more difficult. Plus, they've got the wisdom of Gandalf. 5, epics always have a list of highly significant things or events to that nation, usually wars, women, famous warriors, ships, gods, and so forth. Now, in what we have a list of in The Lord of the Rings is all the various individuals who make up the elves, the tribes, that is, the elves, the dwarves, the race of men, and the Ents, and all the other creatures which make up the tribes, the various tribes, and folk, people. Folk is an ancient German word for people that we find in The Lord of the Rings. 6, supernatural agency is important in the lives of the people. They must follow rules of gods and piety, like slaughtering an animal and offering wine. Again, piety is not so important in The Lord of the Rings. Piety just essentially is being courageous and listening to wisdom in Lord of the Rings. In the Greek we're going to read, they offer wine to the gods routinely because they had a polytheistic idea that the gods were just like people, except they were immortal. And that's all. 7, travel into the unknown, or fighting in a winner-take-all risk is necessary to the narrative. Okay, this happens in The Lord of the Rings. They travel off into Sauron, which is not some place they usually go. It's definitely a forbidding place with all kinds of monsters and creatures who want to destroy them. But they have to go there to get rid of the ring. It takes a lot of endurance and dedication, obviously. 8, love is a motivating factor in action. Usually this is love between two heroic individuals, typically a man and a woman. But in this case, in The Lord of the Rings, it's kind of been modernized so that it's kind of a brotherhood, where we have the hobbits are a brotherhood, or kin. Kin is a word that's very close to folk. And they are doing this on behalf of their own children and their friends. In other words, kind of thinking ahead for the next generation. So they're making the world safe for the next generation. And that's a kind of love as well, even though it's not romantic love, or it's kind of an agape love, as we say in Christian terms, a selfless love that's not erotic. 9, honor is involved in a family staying together and their reputation. Okay, in this case, we have the hobbits have to come back and reclaim their kin and their extended family. And family stays together and they have the same values, and that's what it's all about. And then 10, wars typically fought on 2 fronts, home and abroad. Now, they are visited at home but by a couple of wraiths, ring wraiths, who are supernatural kind of demonic figures who invade the West. And they have to escape them and get back to the East. And then, of course, they fight the war in The Lord of the Rings abroad. The further east they get, the more enemies they find, but also the more allies they pick up to fight the enemies. In the Greek epic we're going to read in Homer, it's much more clear. You have Homer, the Greek hero Odysseus, has a home on the island of Ithaca. His wife and son, Telemachus and Penelope, are being pressured into giving up their home. In the meantime, he has not pleased one of the gods, and he's been diverted from coming home directly. So there you have it, 10 characteristics. Think about that a little bit. Read the syllabus for the first day, and then see the film on Friday. Okay, so again, you can, this course will have 1 paper, but it's primarily not about the paper, it's about taking the test. So make sure you read, get your reading done. If you read and take the quizzes on time, I guarantee you that you will do just fine in this course. Okay, but if you have questions, be sure to email me, and I will get to you. All right, have a good semester, guys.